morning. Today I am going to read Mark 10:46 through 52. And is it on this page? It's on the other page, I think. Yeah. Okay, so it's Jesus heals blind Bartimaeus. But I'm going to most people are preaching about how blind Bartimaeus gets healed, and kind of staying in the same vein of persistent faith, but a little different. And you'll see as we go along. And so they reached Jericho. Later, as Jesus and his disciples left town, a great crowd was following. A blind beggar named Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, was sitting beside the road as Jesus was going by. When Bartimaeus heard that Jesus from Nazareth was nearby, he began to shout out, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." "Be quiet," some of the people yelled at him. But he only shouted louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." When Jesus heard him, he stopped, and he said, "Tell him to come here." So they called the blind man. "Cheer up," they said. "Come on, he's calling you." Bartimaeus threw aside his coat, jumped up, and came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked. "Teacher," the blind man said, "I want to see." And Jesus said to him, "Go your way, your faith has healed you." And instantly the blind man could see. Then he followed Jesus down the road. So I love blind Bartimaeus and his story. To me, it's a lot like the woman who had the issue of blood, because they had to be persistent. There were people in the way of the woman with the issue of blood. She had to press through the crowd. With blind Bartimaeus, he had people telling him to be quiet. And the perspective that I wanted to take on this... Sorry, my daughter's cat's making noise in her bedroom. But the perspective or what I saw when I was reading this, or remembered when I was reading this, is how much blind Bartimaeus' story reminds me of when you start following God. Not when you get saved, but when you actually start following God. Because a lot of people will see that you have something going on in your life that is hard or that you're struggling with. Before I started really investing in my faith in God, and not in a religious way, but living it as actual faith, as actual... I don't like the word religious, but I think of it more as making this my lifestyle, the way that some people make the gym their personality and their lifestyle. Actually making this a huge part of my life and not just something that I did on Sunday. And people could see that I was struggling with depression, and people could see that I was struggling with being suicidal. And that I was struggling with PTSD, and that I was struggling with just being alive. I was underweight. I think at my lowest, I was somewhere near 112 pounds. I could have very well been under that because I never weighed myself. For my body, it's not good. It doesn't look good. But I was so stressed out I couldn't eat. I was nauseous all the time from anxiety and stress. And then the job that I was working at the time, I moved all of the time, and there was no rest, and I was exhausted and still pushing myself, and my body was taking the hit badly. I could not gain weight, and I was trying. And people would tell me, "You look great," because I was skinny, but I was so unhealthy, and I was too thin, to the point where it did not look right. And people could see, just like people could see blind Bartimaeus was blind, that I was struggling with things in my life. And when I started pushing into the things of God, so many people didn't want to hear about it. They were fine with me talking about being suicidal and depressed and having anxiety and panic attacks and all of the eating stuff that I was having issues with. Nobody minded if I talked about that. But nobody wanted to hear me call out for God. Nobody wanted to hear me talk about God or how he had saved my life. And in this passage, he's crying out, Jesus, Son of David. He's acknowledging that he is the Son of God. Because even blind Bartimaeus, who was blind, could see that Jesus was the Son of God and that he was the way for him to be healed. He was the path. I was dying on the inside and killing myself in a job, and I finally turned to God, and people didn't want to hear about it. But even in the middle of everything that was going wrong in my life, I could see that God was going to be my only way out, and nobody wanted to hear about it. And it's one of those things where, like, so often when you come to God, when you have that come to Jesus moment, you could say, if we're going to be a little cheeky about it, you could say that there's a lot of times where people are going to try to kind of shut you down and they don't want to hear about it. And there's this moment in that where you can choose to be silent and stop calling out and stop talking about it. Or you can choose, like blind Bartimaeus, and you can shout all the more. It said, but he only shouted louder. And for me personally, it wasn't necessarily that I began to shout, but I just began to cut things out of my life. And blind Bartimaeus did the same thing. It says, Bartimaeus threw aside his coat, jumped up, and came to Jesus. That coat was something given to him as a way to identify him as being blind. It was something given to him to mark him. And there are certain things that I had in my life that marked me a certain way. And I started to just slowly either stop doing those things or to cut those things out of my life completely. And it wasn't overnight. I didn't come back to God, and it didn't happen for me instantly like it did for blind Bartimaeus. And I think that that is the persistent faith part of this. So many people read their Bible for the first time, and then they start reading it continuously, and they're like, nothing is changing. And that is where I want to go to Ephesians 4:23. Because every time I prayed, this is what God would bring me back to. Instead, there must be spiritual renewal of your thoughts and attitudes. And every time I'd be like, God, what should I be doing? What should I be doing? He would bring me back to this. And I'd be like, that's really great, God, but like, I'm dying. I need your help. Like, everything in my life is going wrong. And I would just go on and on and on and on and on. But I kept reading the Bible. And God would keep bringing me back to this scripture. And it just didn't make any sense to me. And I was like, okay, God, but why? Like, why do you keep bringing this up? And the more I was in the Word, the more the way I thought changed. And even though nothing, it seemed like from the outside, if you looked into my life, it looked like from the outside had all the same problems. But the way that I saw them started to change. Blind Bartimaeus had no sight, but he knew if I can get to Jesus, everything can change. His miracle happened immediately. Mine didn't happen immediately. And I think that's the thing, is that people are going to want you to shut up when you come to God, just like they wanted Bartimaeus to shut up. And people aren't going to want to hear what you have to say always, because people are happy to be doing whatever they want. But nobody wants to hear when you change your life, except for other people who are just as desperately trying to change their life. And as I came to God, and I started to read the Word and read the Word and read the Word on days when I felt like it, on days when I didn't feel like it, on days when I had no hope and it didn't look like anything was changing on days when I had a great day. Just kept reading the word when it felt like I wasn't changing enough, when it felt like I wasn't doing enough, when it felt like none of this was enough. It just kept going back to the word and reading it. And the more I read it, the more I changed. And the more I changed, the more things in my life began to change. And it wasn't so much that any of the outside things really changed so much as the way that I saw them and the way that I reacted to them and the way that I am changed. And I began to slowly change things around me. And there are things in my life that I don't do anymore. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I don't hang out with people who are doing those things when they're doing those things. I have friends that are not saved. And when I see them, I'll see them when they're sober. But I don't hang out with people that aren't sober. And drinking doesn't make me feel good. I just feel worse. Smoking doesn't make me feel better. I just feel worse. And I think that in our world, there is this acceptance of things. And until you are desperate enough that you're like, I'm cutting these things out of my life. I'm cutting these, maybe even people sometimes. Sometimes there's people that you do have to cut out because there's no way for you to change if they're in your life, because you will rise or fall to the level of your association. You will either be changed by those people, or you will be strong enough in your faith to change the people around you, because what you have will rub off on others. And if you are not strong enough in your faith that the people around you change, but you start to change and revert back to something that no longer serves you or God, you're going to have to leave that environment for a time. And I'm not saying that everybody has to cut off everyone permanently, but if you're in an abusive situation, it's understandable that you would leave and stop letting those people come back into your life to speak something into your life that is not helpful, or to do things to you that is not helpful. In my life, for a season, I cut off everybody. I had gotten so hurt and so broken and so down that just talking about certain things robbed me of breath. And when God was bringing me this scripture, I was like, how is this going to help me? How is this going to fix anything? How is changing my thoughts and my attitude going to help me? And I had been really betrayed by people that I thought cared about me. And I had been abandoned in a time when I wouldn't have abandoned others. And I didn't understand what was happening, because I kept thinking if these people were in my shoes and they needed me, I would show up and I would stand up for them and I would say something. And why is nobody standing up for me and doing something for me? Why am I facing this thing alone? Why is nobody who I would have stood up for here for me? Because I have showed loyalty and I have showed love and I have showed kindness to these people, and nobody is here for me. And I was so confused and so betrayed and so hurt, and I had to just cut people out. I had to stop listening to people talk to me about places and things that I had done, because I just couldn't. And people didn't realize that I had nearly taken my own life. People didn't realize that I was struggling with PTSD and just fighting every day to not have a panic attack. People didn't understand. And then I was home alone, hurt and betrayed. And I'm having to come to God. And I know that God is going to change things, but it didn't happen overnight. But I just kept crying out to God. I just kept praying, and I kept reading, and I kept renewing my thoughts, and I kept renewing my attitudes. And those same things that used to hurt so bad started to fade in a way that I can't explain. My husband and I were in the store the other day, and I saw somebody who had hurt me so badly the other day. that if it had been 2 years ago, I would have had to have left the store because I would have had a panic attack, a full-blown, I can't be here, I have to leave, I can't breathe, panic attack. And instead, I stood at the end of the register just staring at this person and realizing how much I had changed. Not that person, because they wouldn't even look in my direction to acknowledge me because they know that they have hurt me and done wrong by me. And it didn't bother me that they wouldn't look at me. It didn't bother me that they were there. I could breathe. I was fine. I wasn't even mad. And I think sometimes when we come to God, we're hoping that we're going to have a blind Bartimaeus moment where it is an instantaneous change. Bartimaeus threw off his coat. He had faith and he changed right then. And sometimes it's going to be Ephesians 4:23, and you're going to have to continuously renew your thoughts and attitudes in the Word. And the change will happen, but it won't happen instantly, because it did not happen instantly for me. The day I left to go and commit suicide, I came home that same day and I was in the same situation and nothing had changed. And it wasn't until I kept getting in the Word and kept getting in the Word and kept getting in the Word and kept praying and kept pressing in and kept pushing that things slowly began to change. But it started with me, and it started with me saying, God, I thank you that I'm different today than I was yesterday, and I'll be different tomorrow than I am today, and that it will not remain this way, that I will not remain the same, that I will change and be better tomorrow than I was today, and that I am better today than I was yesterday. It started bit by bit, and it did not just happen in one day. And all of us would love to have a blind Bartimaeus moment where we cry out. But sometimes you're going to have a blind Bartimaeus moment that people are going to tell you to shut up when you begin to change instead. And your miracle doesn't happen immediately. But you do have to start doing like Bartimaeus and casting off your coat, casting off the things that are hurting you, whether it's alcohol or drugs or anything that's hurting you. There are ways of thinking that hurt you, victim mentalities that can hurt you. I remember very clearly coming to a point where I realized that whether I had meant to or not, because I had been so broken and so hurt, things that I had said and done had been manipulative, not because I am a manipulative person by nature, but because when you're broken and you're hurt, you see everything from the standpoint of being broken and hurt. And I went and I apologized to everyone that I thought that I might have hurt with the things that I had done, and people that didn't even deserve for me to apologize from the natural standpoint. But I remember thinking that I am going to humble myself, and I am going to apologize, and I am going to say I'm sorry, because even from the natural standpoint, even though I know that this person might be the person that did wrong to me, I still was manipulating people, whether purposefully or accidentally, by what I was going through. I hurt people. And so I'm going to be humble enough to say I'm sorry, even if nobody ever apologizes to me who hurt me, even if nobody ever acknowledges the hurt that they did to me. I am going to be the one that says, I'm sorry, because I'm going to change who I am for God. I'm going to change my attitude about this. And there were several people that were like, you didn't have to tell me you're sorry. And there were several people that just were like, thank you. And like, there were certain thoughts and attitudes that I had to cast off. There were certain habits that I had to cast out of my life. There were certain things that I had to do to change. And mentalities of, but I was the one that was hurt. And I was like, instead of going, but they hurt me, I had to go, I forgive them. I forgive them because they don't know that what they did hurt me this badly because they don't know that I was already going through this other hurt when they hurt me. Because hurt people. And sometimes they're not thinking about you when they're hurting you because they're thinking about them and how much they're hurting. And just being able to say words like that out loud and mean it came from just continuously renewing my mind, working on forgiveness, because forgiveness is important to God. Because Jesus literally hung on his cross and said, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." And he wasn't just talking about the Jews and the Pharisees and the people crucifying them. He was talking about us when we're lost. And how people make fun of Judas and how awful Judas was and da-da-da. We've all been Judas. We've all hurt and betrayed God at one point in our lives. And Jesus was talking about us. He was saying, "Forgive them, Lord, because I'm making this sacrifice. And there are going to be some that reject it. And then there are going to be some that are not grateful for it. And there are going to be some that don't see it." And Jesus was forgiving us. So I worked on forgiveness, because if Jesus could forgive us while dying on a cross and say, "Forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they're doing," how much more important do you think it is for us to forgive people for small offenses in comparison with being murdered an innocent death on the cross? So I began to work on forgiveness, and then I began to work on my love walk, which I'm working on every day. But every single day we are having to cast off things out of our life, like Bartimaeus cast that coat off. And every single day, you're going to have to make changes. You're going to have to look at you and go, "God, what do you want me to put on the altar to sacrifice to you today?" There have been times where I've come to God and I've said, "God, I'm hurt and this hurts and I'm offended and I'm angry and I'm bitter about this thing, and I'm going to leave this here with you. I'm going to put this on the altar. I'm going to leave it with you. I'm going to let it go." And it's not like it happens immediately. Sometimes you got to put that thing back up on the altar because it tries to crawl off. Sometimes it's like Brother Hagin, who's an old minister who's passed away. He said it's like fly paper. It's sticky. You try to let it go and realize it's still stuck to you. So you do it again and you do it again. I used to think that forgiveness was supposed to be like a one and done. Like you forgive and you're done. And I was praying and I was like, "God, why can't I let this thing go? I'm so mad still, and I'm so angry, and I'm angry at myself because I can't just forgive it and let it go." And and sometimes it's because you're going to have to do it more than once, because the devil doesn't want you to forgive. He wants you to stay trapped in unforgiveness, because he wants you to fester. He wants you to be infected with unforgiveness and unlovingness and unkindness, and he wants you to be trapped in your old habits. And the longer that you hold on to those things, I always say that unforgiveness is like a cut, and if you forgive quickly, that thing heals better. Like, it might still ache every once in a while, but like, you've forgiven, you've let it go, and you can go on pretty quickly. But when you hold on to unforgiveness, it's like an infection that just keeps getting worse and worse and worse until it's festered. And then you have to do surgery to get rid of that infection, because it's so deep in that you have to cut it out with a knife, and it hurts. It's easier to forgive right away and say, "Father God, forgive them because they know not what they do." They don't realize what they're doing. They don't realize that I'm already hurt and they're hurting me more. They don't realize I'm already bleeding and they're cutting me. They don't realize how insensitive they're being. And maybe they do realize. Maybe this person is hurting you, or this thing has hurt you and it was intentional. In my case, a lot of the things that hurt me were done very intentionally. And that's something that hurt even worse, because it's like, why would you do this to me intentionally when I was good to you? and I still have to forgive, and it feels unfair. But it's like, do you want to be healed and set free? Do you want to be different today than you were yesterday? Do you want real change? Or do you want these things to keep haunting you forever? Unforgiveness doesn't hurt the other person. They don't care if you forgive them or not. Unforgiveness hurts you, because the longer you live with unforgiveness inside of you, the longer you stay blind. If blind Bartimaeus had held on to being blind, he would have never received all the things that he did from Jesus, because he didn't just get healed, he got to follow him down the road. He got to actually witness Jesus in real life. He would have missed out on that opportunity. When we hold on to unforgiveness, we are missing out on opportunities. And I think that there is a real story that is sometimes unseen in Bartimaeus' story, that you're going to have to cry out to God. And when people tell you to shut up because they don't want to hear about how God is changing you, or how you're crying out to God, or how you're changing who you are, you're going to have to keep crying out. I had so many people when I got saved that loved me, that were unsaved, that did not want to hear about how I was coming back to Jesus. They didn't want to hear it. And so I just didn't talk about it with them as much, but it comes out. Because when you find a good thing, you can't help but talk about it. But I didn't let it stop me either. Blind Bartimaeus, when those people were telling him to shut up and be quiet, he did not stop. He just cried out all the more. When I was dying from suicide and people were fine with hearing about that, like not dying from suicide, dying from suicidal thoughts and depression and dying on the inside all the time, people were fine with hearing about that. But when I was coming to God, they didn't want to hear it, but I just cried out to God all the more. It did not make me stop. And now I have had people throw remarks at me about how all I ever do is pray and everything's Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And I find it to be such a compliment, because 2 years ago, that was not the compliment that I would have gotten. The compliment that I would have gotten was on anything other than how much Jesus was in my life. I think that we need to cry out. We need to be persistent in our crying out. We need to cast things off of our life. And then I think that we also need to keep pressing in and renewing our mind. I love Ephesians 4:23 now that I know what God was trying to say to me. It made me so frustrated when he kept bringing Ephesians 4:23 to me, because it was like, God, what does my thoughts and attitudes have to do with this? But not everybody gets an immediate miracle like blind Bartimaeus. Sometimes you're going to have to just keep showing up and renewing and renewing and renewing. And when you do renew, you are going to feel like at times, nothing is happening, God. I remember so many times being like, God, nothing is happening. Nothing is changing, and being so angry. And not with God, but with myself, because I was like, God, I'm still the same. I'm doing all the things and I am not changing. And like, just so desperate for anything to shift. And it didn't happen overnight, but it happened little by little. And things that I thought that I would never be able to cast off of myself, things that I just thought I was always going to struggle with, they're not there anymore. And when they try to come back, because things that you've struggled with before, the devil will try to bring back into your life, because he knows that it worked before, so it'll work again, right? But if you renew your thoughts and your attitudes in the word over and over and over again, you are going to close doors to the devil that you didn't realize you'd closed. There are ways that he has tried to come back, and things that people have said like, well, this is never going to happen. And I internally go, thank you, Satan, for letting me know that everything that I'm doing is working I laugh on the inside of myself going, thank you for bringing that piece of discouragement, because when you tried to bring that piece, I now know that I have what I say I have. I now know that the thing that I have been praying for, I have, and it's mine now. Because you're coming trying to tell me I don't have it, and so now I know I have it. So the things that I thought were never going to change have changed. The things that I thought I couldn't have or couldn't do have changed. Things that I thought I wouldn't get through have changed. And it's pretty much all that I have. But I do think that if you have started reading the Word, because I don't know who's going to see this video over time, but if you've started reading the Word and you think nothing is changing, keep reading it, because things will change. Just saw my mom on here. My mom can tell anyone that there are so many times that I called my mom and I would cry because nothing seemed like it was changing. And my mom would say, it is changing. You just can't see it because it's in the spirit. And it's coming into the flesh. And there are so many things that now I would have fallen apart when they happened. And I call my mom, and before my mom can even say it, I go, I know it's just an attack of the enemy. I know it's just the enemy trying to discourage me. But I know that it's not what it looks like. And I'm not discouraged and I'm not defeated. So just keep pressing in and just keep reading the Word, even when you feel like nothing has changed, because you have what you say you have. You have no idea how much just reading this over and 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 over again will change you. I have started by reading individual books that I felt like God drew me to, and then went back and read the entire Bible, and then went back and reread the New Testament, and rereading the New Testament again. Just don't put the Bible down. Even when you feel like nothing is changing, when you don't feel like reading it, when you feel like you can't breathe, pick it up and read it. I will pick this thing up and I will read it when I am sobbing my eyes out and I don't feel like doing anything but wallowing. And I will pick this up and I will start reading and I will start praising God and I will start thanking Him for how far I've come. Just don't give up on yourself, because God never gives up on you. He never leaves you nor forsakes you. Be like blind Bartimaeus and just keep crying out all the louder. Anyways, I pray that you guys have a blessed day. Thank you for the people that did jump on. I can see that Victoria jumped on. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. I am going to keep posting. I don't know how often I'll keep posting. I won't be home on Thursday. There is a prayer meeting at World Harvest Church in Murrieta that I am going to go to. It's close enough that I can drive to it. So Thursday I will not be on, but I will try to post during the week. Probably not on the weekends, but during the week, and just post little Bible study type things like this. But thank you for joining and have a great day. Bye.